But the only rules of comedy, the only context is you should be funny.
Do you ever regret not having kids?
No, never a day.
What's with this feud that you seem to have with Jon Stewart?
I identify it as just fully fueled by insecurity.
Whose insecurity?
Mine.
What have you learned from being divorced twice?
Just give him the money.
Hi, I'm Michael Sebastian, Editor-in-Chief of Esquire. Today I'm joined by a multi-hyphenate who has been in the industry for more than 3 decades. From his groundbreaking WTF podcast, to raw, introspective comedy specials like End Times Fun and his latest, Panicked, to his role in the upcoming Bruce Springsteen biopic, Deliver Me From Nowhere. He's made a career out of brutal honesty, turning neuroses, grief, and rage into something that feels like connection. Please welcome Marc Maron.
Something that feels like connection. I'll take it.
So Panicked is your latest stand-up special.
Yeah.
And there's a line that you have in it in which you say, basically, how does it feel that we liberals annoyed America into fascism?
Progressives have really got to figure out how to deal with this buzzkill problem. I know these are important issues, but you do realize we annoyed the average American into fascism. You do realize that.
I'm curious, do you think liberals have always been annoying, or did something change in the way that liberals communicate that has kind of created this effect?
That line about, we've succeeded in annoying the average American into fascism came to me, like a week or two before I taped.
Really?
And it's a really powerful bit.
It is.
It's a funny bit, but it's a real kind of, it brings a lot of things together.
You've been a good liberal, most of your life, if not all of your life, right? You were on Air America. You've got this long track record of that.
But I spoke to them critically in a way that they could laugh at themselves, and that's good. Yeah. Coming from me, it's going to work.
Yeah.
But also, it was pretty clear to tell them that I had no solutions, and I don't know how much hope there is. But you have to acknowledge what's happening. I don't know that there's ever been really an organized, on the same page American left, probably since the 30s, right? And I think that because there's no unified left, they kind of build their life around the righteousness that drives the issue that they're the most interested in.
Yeah.
And I think that in of itself, as a point of conversation, can become a little annoying.
Yeah. My favorite part of Panicked is at the very end when you do the Taylor Swift thing. And in fact, you should do a whole album of Taylor Swift covers or something like that.
That would be
feel
funny.
like your audience would basically be middle-aged dads of girls who love Taylor Swift, right?
That's an interesting idea, because is that guy, am I still going to meet with that guy from Decca? Yeah. Yeah, there's someone who wants to make a record.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been playing music a long time,
Yeah, but it's just a great version of it. But you've wanted to have her on your show, is what I understand.
Sure.
If she was on your show, what is the main thing you would want to ask her?
I think a lot of people take for granted, the job we do in entertainment. Just sort of she's just a singer or whatever.
Right.
I spoke to Ariana Grande. And these, these are just people. Do you know what the weight of playing an arena is, night after night, to put on that show, to deliver that for that type of fandom?
Yeah.
It's an immense, almost inhuman job.
Yeah.
To hold that space. I don't know that you can explain the magic of how they do that,
right?
Other than they're hard workers. But if you explore their past, at least you can fill in, what's, at the root of that amazing use of talent and power.
So there isn't a specific question. You just want to kind of hear the whole story, in other words.
I don't know there's any magic question that I'm going to ask Taylor Swift that's going to, answer, who is Taylor Swift, why.
Yeah.
But I think over an evolving conversation, you can sort of get a vibe.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so in Panicked, you talk about the manosphere, which is this sort of actually, you define the manosphere for us.
Well, I think the manosphere, I think it's a collective, a tribal collective of mostly men who felt threatened, by the way culture was going. They felt, kind of pushed aside, that they didn't have a voice.
Yeah.
And now you have them as a dominant, voice within the culture, because I think they were turned out by right-wing propaganda.
I want to pay you a compliment on that front, though, because I feel like the manosphere, one of the things that it grew out of, Me Too movement explodes into view. Very necessary, right? But there's a moment where a lot of well-meaning progressive men kind of receded and said, you know what, we don't need to talk right now. And it was very well-intentioned, but at the same time, you had a whole kind of generation of young men that are like, well, okay, well, wait a second, how do we navigate this space? And there were no good voices necessarily to guide them through that. So all of these, kind of grifters and bad actors kind of stepped in there.
Mm-hmm.
You, on the other hand, though, you were there, you know what I mean? And you were continuing to, I think, be a voice for that kind of positive masculinity.
True. I think men in general were afraid, and I think younger men, didn't know how to navigate, interpersonal relationships with women. And they don't know anyways.
Yeah.
So it's just added a layer
made it all
of
the more
complexity.
awkward. Yeah.
Made them nervous.
Yeah.
It made them scared.
Yeah.
And it's like, is it okay if do I have consent to talk?
Yeah.
And so the anti-woke bunch, locked into that, and there was pushback. I used to do a joke about that. I think I'm about 85% woke, and the other 15% I keep to myself, and that's really what woke is.
Yeah, right.
Is that there was this idea on the anti-woke flank that don't censor yourself at all.
Right.
And it's like, no, that's how civilization works.
Right.
We don't say a lot of words anymore.
Right, exactly.
Because it's out of respect. Once you start normalizing this language, just because you're upset you can't say retard anymore.
Yeah.
However they defend it, like, but I'm not using it like that, it's just a word. But once you normalize that word again, the damage that it has on an interpersonal level or on a smaller level with kids in school, with mentally challenged people, with families of mentally challenged people, that once that word just becomes normalized after they'd spent all these years, looking for the respect so they could have them or their child fit into the world without shame is gone.
Yeah.
Look, I've taken my hits and I've learned my lessons from, they're hard-learned things, if you're an asshole.
Yeah.
And to sort of get vulnerable and, understand why you're an asshole as opposed to double down on being an asshole is a choice.
It is a choice. Is there a word that you feel like you can't say that you're like, you know what, it's kind of a funny word or it's an effective word?
A lot of times there's reasons why these words are offensive. And I think you can say whatever words you want. But there's a redundancy and a hackneyed element to it if you just repeat it for that effect. I mean, is your whole life an act hinging on, tranny?
Right.
I mean, like, what is that?
Right.
Those words, some of them, specifically the R word, is something we grew up with, and it's something that has a certain weight to it, and it's very common to you if you're of a certain age that you're going to say retard, and you may still say it, with your friends or whatever. But I understand from exploring that word on stage, in a full bit, like why can we not say it? And then somebody came up to me and said, I know that you think you're exploring something, but my son's mentally challenged, and it is hurtful and difficult, for everybody around a person like that. And oddly, like literally that same night, I went to see a concert, and behind me was a mentally challenged kid, grown up, and he was like, he's having a great time, and then standing next to him was his father, I guess, who just had this look of like, it's a hard life.
Right.
And and we do the best we can. And I don't know, between those two events, I'm like, I get it. Yeah. With me in words, it's like you let go of words. I mean, like, don't say it, and I don't need it.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want you to think about it too much. Just kind of spit it out. If you didn't know how old you are, how old are you right now?
I don't know, 43.
43, yeah? Okay, all right. Is there something that happened at 43 that kind of like makes you think that way? Or is it just like your body feels 43?
I never really felt that life was going by quickly. When you're in it, you're like, it's kind of plodding by.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
But then what happens is all of a sudden, like, it's like, oh my God, how am I the oldest guy in the room?
Right.
Like, I thought all these guys were my peers. They're all 20 years younger than me. What was I thinking?
Yeah.
Like, Mulaney or Nate or these guys. I just always saw them as my peers. And then all of a sudden you hit 60 and you're like, you guys are 40 what? When did that happen?
Right.
Because I really kind of manifested very late,
Yeah.
I mean, the podcast and whatever sort of audience I was able to build happened in my 40s.
Yeah.
So I think that, in my mind, some part of me is still in my 40s. And I don't think that ever really went away.
Yeah. So let's talk about the show for a minute. Why bring it to an end? 16 years. What's your thinking there?
Well, 16 years.
You're tired. Are you tired?
Time.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think we're tired on a level that it's sort of... It's
existential?
A little. It's not hard to explain. But, like I said, Brendan McDonald, my producer, and I, have been working together in one way or another in audio since 2004.
Right.
There were podcasters before me, and there were podcasters when I started. But in terms of the medium becoming relevant and profitable, we were there to watch that build around us.
Yeah.
There was no reason for us to get to a point where we were autopiloting or just kind of walking through the paces.
Yeah.
Because you do develop a style over time, and there is a way to fake it. But part of the decision was, why would we want to get to that point? Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to keep going if part of us is exhausted, and there's part of me that I want to have my life back in a way?
Yeah.
Because the show is really about me and the arc of my life, and then people enter into that.
Yeah.
But people who listen to it and listen to the monologues and move through it have seen me move through almost everything one can in life, other than the birth of a child, because I don't have that. But the death of a partner, cats coming and going, women coming and going, career things coming and going, my own, sort of personal anxieties and mental health coming on. I've arrived at this place where I can, own myself and be okay with myself. And maybe now I'd kind of like to enjoy that without, putting so much of myself into it and out there, because there is kind of an emotional responsibility to it.
Don't take this the wrong way, but you seem to me like a guy who is going to have a hard time enjoying it.
No, I acknowledge that, but I do know that we've given ourselves enough time to process this, and the bigger part of me, feels like it is the right decision. And another reason, like by stopping it, we have sort of guaranteed its place as a body of work. It's not a disposable show. We're not just three dudes on a mic talking about the last time we crapped our pants at it.
Right.
It's not afternoon radio.
What is, in your opinion, the most underrated episode of WTF?
There have been some that I think have been deeply disturbing and provocative.
Such as?
Well, Todd Hansen, from The Onion, who was the original kind of, editor of The Onion when it really became successful. I wanted to interview him because he was in my world, comedy. And we set up an interview. I was in Brooklyn. I was sort of at, I think it was like a Holiday Inn in Brooklyn. And after we turned the mics off, he's like, I know you didn't know this. I've been to this hotel before. And the last time I was at this hotel, I tried to commit suicide. So, I didn't know that, and I couldn't have known that. But he had attempted to kill himself in that hotel. And then I said, if you ever want to talk about that, let's do another sit down. I don't remember how long it took, but he decided to do it. And so that episode, the second part of that, it's two conversations. And in the second part, he walks me through the events that led to it and what happened in that hotel. In terms of life experience and getting into that type of vulnerability and that experience, that's pretty heavy.
Yeah. The Louis C.K. episode from, I think it's like 2010 was named...
Two-parter?
The two-parter, yeah. That's like ranked by Slate.
Before there was 10,000 podcasts.
Yeah, the best episode ever. And it's really good.
Yeah.
What's your recollection of that one, considering it's considered, among the best?
I felt like he was doing me a favor. I'm like, can we just do my thing? He's like, yeah, okay, I'll do your thing, whatever. And then we just got into it. So my recollection was that, he was going to tell me, why our relationship was strained. We kind of resolved some things around his point of view of what was happening. It showed a different side. And I think there was a lot of levity along with the kind of
that's great.
Conflict resolution.
You guys aren't close anymore?
No, because like he, after he went down for, his transgressions, because of that podcast or those two podcasts, we are connected in the public sphere. The New York Times piece came out on a Sunday, and it caught fire. Of course, we had to address it. So we were on the road somewhere. I can't remember where, and we had to sit down with the gear and figure it out. Basically the thrust of it was, I didn't know the scope of this, and he's, he fucked up, but I'm his friend, and I will be his friend if he needs a friend through this, I think the tagline on it was like, he lied to me, about the depth of this situation, I don't even know if he listened to it, but I think that I wasn't willing, nor was anybody really, to go down with him or to necessarily die on that hill with him in terms of defending his behavior, that I think he felt like I betrayed him somehow. That was it. We no longer talked. And then, years later, I got a weird email from him, addressing, the work of my partner Lynn, who had passed away, that he had seen a movie and whatever, and that, it was awkwardly phrased, but he said, look, if you ever want to talk, I'm open to that. Mm-hmm. And, I said, look, I'd love to talk to you. We've both been through a lot of shit and whatever, and I'm not going to really frame the language that he used because it's not particularly flattering. It's a little peculiar. And I wrote back, I said, yeah, I'm willing to talk, but I'm not going to address, how I handled your problem. That's done. If you want to start from here, okay. He goes, well, I don't know if that's possible. And I went, all right, well, this is what it is. But oddly, actually, I don't know why it's oddly. I was at the Comedy Cellar a few months ago. Chris Rock was there, Louis was there, Darren Aronofsky was there for some reason, and a couple of guys from my LA bunch. Everyone was there, and it was the table thing, you sit at the back table. So, and Louis was there, and I was sitting there. And, he comes in, and I'm like, all right, well, this is going to be what it's going to be. But I'm not moving. But, he's completely pleasant. Mm-hmm. And he was like, so, I was talking. He's like, what were you saying? Like, it was completely gone.
Yeah.
So, and it happened once at the Comedy Store. So that's that.
Yeah.
We're okay. I wouldn't say we're friends anymore, but,
yeah.
The tension is not there.
You love a callback in your comedy. You also like this idea, though, of the snake eating itself. I feel like I've heard you talk about that. I've seen you write about it in your book.
I recently did a joke on stage about the manosphere, about the Ouroboros.
Right, eating their own balls or something like that? Yeah. What is the manosphere?
That's the totality of the manosphere, the cock eating its own balls.
But I feel like having Louis on your show in this last final stretch would be like, that callback, that sort of, snake.
Yeah, I don't think it can happen, though. How he frames what happened and whether or not it's really approachable or whether or not he'd want to approach that. Because, if I had him on, it would be my responsibility to kind of cover our relationship in relation to that.
Yeah.
And since then, that, I think he's got it framed in a way that, he can live with, whether you think it's correct or not, whether he would, kind of double down on his position or whether, I don't know what I'd get there.
Yeah.
In relation to what's going on in the world. And I don't think it's a valid or necessary thing to do.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you started to make money from this, right? And I'm curious.
The podcast?
Yeah. And obviously
all the other
things
stuff?
To do. Yeah.
Yeah.
How does money change a person?
Being rich and living a rich lifestyle is just not in my brain. I don't and I don't even have kids. I got money and I got nowhere to go with it. Mm-hmm. Like in my will, there's a big chunk of money where I'm like, I just, I left it to Brendan to give to the appropriate charities.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And, a couple of friends.
Cats?
What are you going to do with the cats? I just got to get them somewhere.
Yeah.
And I should probably revise it a little bit in terms of where they go. But the way it changed my life, to be honest with you, is I don't have to worry about it anymore. I like knowing that, I don't have to really check the prices of groceries.
Sure. Yeah.
I can eat wherever I want. Mm-hmm. I can, fly comfortably.
Yeah.
I can help friends who need money if I have to.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten past that place in terms of buy a nice car. I'm driving a 2019 Avalon because I like it. Doing comedy at the beginning, it's sparse, dude. And when you got a chunk of money, whether it was for a deal with a network that didn't go anywhere, it's like, okay, so I'm good for a little while.
Yeah.
And I still have that mindset. And I should probably get out of it. You know what I mean?
You should buy a new car or something. I don't know.
My friend made me buy this watch.
What kind of watch?
It's Omega Speedmaster.
Oh, it's a great watch. That's a great watch, yeah.
Classic, right? You got to wind it, though. It's so funny. My girlfriend is like, doesn't it just wind itself? I'm like, no, this is how
it's
watches
mechanical.
used to be.
Yeah. How much is too much to pay for a pair of socks?
Yeah, that's the other thing. I just order socks. I do, but that's another thing. I buy things. This guy makes boots, Brian the Bootmaker down in LA. And I'm a boot guy. I'm kind of like a jeans guy. I finally landed on something. I never thought I'd be a silver bracelet old man, but I seem to be that.
Okay, so I want to shift gears here for a second, and I want to talk about grief. This is something that you have explored a lot. What have you learned from grief?
That everybody is on the grief spectrum just by human nature.
Right.
It's just not unusual that you can't avoid it.
Right.
You can try, and that might twist your personality into something bad, or tragic.
Yeah.
But everyone's going to deal with loss, and you hope it's not tragic. It's nice if there's an arc to it that makes sense, and that it is something you can process. But everyone's going to die, and a lot of people are going to die alone, and a lot of people are going to die in hospitals. You've been to a hospital? It's fucking horrendous.
Yeah, it's not great.
And there's a reason why people don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Our fear of death is what drives almost everything.
Yeah.
Capitalism, malignant politics. I mean,
we buy stuff so that we can forget that we're going to die, right?
I mean, the whole thing. Yeah. But I think what I learned from it is that it isn't unusual. It's a guarantee.
Yeah.
I do believe that as humans, through tradition, culture, and just reality, that I do think we can handle it. And I think that other people can handle it. Sometimes just sitting with you or sitting with somebody, if they're experiencing something, is really enough just to show up as a person in somebody's dark time is sort of an amazing service. And I think it's actually kind of innate. But I also think just acknowledging the reality of it and trying to wrestle with your own sense of mortality, because when you lose somebody tragically, it's devastating, but you also really realize that how fragile the thing is.
Yeah.
And acting in relationship to a deep awareness of it, and having some sort of, mature acceptance of it, which I don't think I have.
Really, you don't?
I don't think so.
No?
No, because you don't want to die.
Well, this is true. Yes.
But it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can say it's going to happen. But if you really think about it, I mean, then you get into the whole spiritual realm. What's going to get you through that?
Right. What do you think happens to us when we die?
Not much.
Really? That's it? Just black?
Yeah, but lately I've been thinking, is that so bad?
You are
I mean, don't we all need a nap for a while?
It's true, right? I mean, you've been doing the podcast for 16 years, right?
Yeah.
You could use a rest.
Yeah.
But
I don't want that rest. But yeah.
You do seem like a mystical, I don't want to use the term spiritual guy, right? But you wrote a whole book about the Jerusalem,
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I believe you necessarily.
The poetry of mysticism, whether it's real or not, doesn't matter. It's part of processing.
Yeah.
That, and I do think it's poetic.
Yeah.
That, why not think that?
Oh, sure, right?
Because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But usually I'll go mystical when I'm, terrified. But I don't go traditional mystical. I don't think I'm going to have a come to Jesus moment.
There's still time. You never know, right?
Yeah, you can do it right at the end.
Yeah, that is.
It's a beautiful thing about the Christian trip. It's okay, I'm sorry. Can I get in? For the
and then
best.
you're fine. Yeah. I'm curious, what was your relationship to God when you were, say, 6 years old compared to what it might be now?
Look, I'm more than happy to entertain the totality of things in the universe, and that there is some sort of inherent pattern or intelligence to it. I can go there.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, there's not this part of me that I gotta find it.
Yeah.
But when I was younger, we grew up kind of conservative Jewish. As a kind of middle class American Jew, no one taught us how to use God. There's a practical element to Christianity. It's Jesus died for you. Here's the process to get forgiven and move through your life with your flaws as long as you stay right with Jesus. The Jewish God, it's sort of you don't understand the language. The stories are very vast, and there may be lessons in there, but as a 6-year-old, I was never taught to fear God or have a relationship with God. It was just not given to me.
Yeah. You referred to your relationship with your dad as the most toxic in your life.
I think so, in terms of the beginning of things, yeah.
What have you learned from your dad?
That eventually you'll forget everything. Whatever heinous transgressions you did as a parent or adult, eventually it'll come down to I don't remember that. If you're lucky, you'll forget it all.
Yeah.
If you're unlucky, you'll forget it all. Yeah, it's a catch-22, I guess. Once the reconciliation kind of came, in terms of the way we butted heads. He was always a pretty charismatic guy, and I think I always, had a certain amount of love for him. But it wasn't, there were periods of time, years sometimes, where I wouldn't engage with him. And I would fight with him. I would push back a lot at different points in my life. I would take him on. But also, he was sort of my best audience. The interesting thing about narcissists, they love any kind of attention.
Sure, yeah.
As long as it's about them. And so he was a pretty good audience for me because I could really bust his balls right to his face. And over time, what happened is I kind of won. Is that, if you have a narcissistic parent, they kind of see you as an appendage. And once they start to lose control, they'll fight.
Yeah.
And then eventually, if you cut it, they're going to have to reckon with you as a person.
Sure, yeah. You've been divorced twice.
Yeah.
What have you learned from being divorced twice?
Just give them the money.
Yeah?
Please, whatever you think you're fighting for, if you're the one with the money, you can't win. Just give them the money, you'll probably make it back, but you're the only one who can stop it. Well, I learned that I'm not great at relationships. You learn that, drama is, a way to avoid intimacy. Even when you both end up crying, that doesn't mean you're being intimate. It just means you're devastating each other. So I still don't quite know how to allow an intimacy that I don't feel is threatening somehow. And that's just because I was, brought up by, emotionally needy, kind of boundaryless people.
Yeah.
So, repair is in progress. I might get it done. I don't know. It's a big project.
What is the difference between sex and love?
Well, you certainly don't need love for sex.
There you go.
I think that ultimately sex, like anything else that feels good, can become, a compulsion more than, something that represents emotion in a love way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's always been the big problem with it, but also the great beauty of it.
Yeah. Is the Marc Maron that we see on stage and here on WTF the same Marc Maron who's talking to friends and family and so on?
I'm weird. I can be pretty vulnerable and open-hearted with strangers, when they come over for an hour. And I can actually be, kind of more open in some ways with audiences than I can in interpersonal relationships. There are guys, like some people think I'm intimidating or aloof or, intense or, whatever. They're nervous to talk to me, out in the world. But there are people that know me that just instinctively, mostly comics, because this is the world I've come, grown up in, that can see right through that and just kind of like, bust my balls and, kind of, get me small and, make me laugh. I love the guys that can see right through me. I can be charmed.
What's with this feud that you seem to have with Jon Stewart?
Well, I think that's just like I identify it as just, a petty kind of, fully fueled by insecurity. And
whose insecurity?
Mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jon never did anything to me. I was just jealous. Yeah, I talked about this recently, probably not smart. And of course it makes clickbait. And it's the same day that Jon's like doing something noble, of course, standing up for Colbert. And then this other clickbait is like, Maron still hates Jon. I'm like, oh my God, fucking timing on that. So just jealous. Because when I was coming up, he was this, smart, cute Jewish guy, who was good at, some people have foresight and are disciplined careerists. And they know how to understand their talent, harness it, and then figure out how to capitalize on it, with their skill set on their terms. And, there are guys now that have that. Like I went to a birthday party for Jon Mulaney, and I'm just surrounded by all these young guns who are, talking about, their lawyers and, and what they need from them. I'm like, I didn't even have a fucking lawyer. I never had any control over my talent. I never knew its limitations or what it was. I was just, all in and just like demanding, a place in the world of comedy. And so throughout my early career, Jon, who was roughly my age, was just everywhere. It never stopped, and like I remember when he did the MTV show and then he had the talk show and he had me on. But my envy of him was always so, I would just shit on him. And to his face, like, who the fuck do you think you are? And it was just consuming. Because like I couldn't get through a week without him being on the cover of a magazine. And for some reason, I saw him as like, if I could only have my shit together, I could be more like that guy.
Right,
if I could commit to
only
a
you had a
haircut.
lawyer, right?
Well, yeah, whatever. Yeah, or understood show business or any of it. Which wasn't true because I was out of my mind. And I was definitely gunning for something else. I don't think I got into comedy to be an entertainer or have a job as a talk show host or anything.
What did you get into it for then?
To hold space and to speak my mind. But I loved comedy, so like I thought like I can do that in comedy.
Yeah.
I thought it was sort of a noble undertaking. The only rules of comedy, the only context is you should be funny. But outside of that, you can fucking do whatever you want, really, on that stage. You get the range, you go from Andy Kaufman to Larry the Cable Guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the spectrum is like, you can do whatever you want up there as long as you're funny. Don't matter how weird you are, no matter what your thoughts are, no matter how fucked up mentally you are. If you can make it funny, you can be who you are. So I think I had a big belief in that. I will eventually be who I am.
Yeah.
And I always was, but it was not whole until fairly recently. So Jon really just represented that, and I was annoying to him. Eventually, he was like, I don't need to take this shit from you, and fuck Maron, But I get it.
Do you think you can get him on your podcast before?
No.
Have you tried?
I tried to get him on early on. I remember I was in Portland, Oregon, and I was like, yeah, I'll do this podcasting. And like, I'm kind of apologizing, I'm kind of making up with people. And, and you and I have had this, thing for a while. He's like, well, yeah. And he says, well, yeah, I just, there's no love here. And I'm like, okay. and then he basically, he said, yeah, I might be willing to, have coffee or something, but yeah, I'm not doing that with you. And then he said, I'm sure what you're doing is very creative, and good luck with it. And just the stinging condescension of that was like, it didn't help anything. And now he's doing a podcast.
Yeah.
So full circle.
I want to ask you about Deliver Me From Nowhere. You play Chuck Plotkin, right? Who's a record producer.
Yeah.
You strike me as a Springsteen guy.
I like Springsteen.
Yeah.
But I'm not necessarily a Springsteen guy.
Really?
No, because when you say someone's a Springsteen guy,
yeah.
They're all in.
Yeah.
They're from Jersey or Philly.
You're from Jersey.
Genetically.
Yeah.
I didn't. But I love Bruce, and I certainly grew to love Bruce, and I did interview him. It was kind of a great. It was a pretty great moment. I read the book. And not unlike a lot of people who have that place in the world. When they write a real book, that's a personal book. You're like, holy shit, I had no idea. And Bruce is all like, yeah, me and the guys are gonna hang out down the shore. You're like, you think like he's just a guy like, oh, me and the fellas, And it's like he's this dark, brooding, self-hating, guy who's like, so hard on himself, and he comes from, just miserable Jersey garbage. His dad was a fuck up, like whatever. So, but it was great because I go out to his house, in Jersey, like the estate out there. I don't know if he lives there anymore. And there's a big house up on the hill there, and then there's this other, structure where, there's a lot of guitars, there's a motorcycle, and I set up my mics, and the publicist is there or whatever. I just see him, coming down the hill, and I just want to kind of break the ice, He sits down. It's during Christmas. It was right before Christmas. And I was like, so what's going on up at the house? A lot of craziness, cooking, presents, setting up for Christmas. And he says, correct. And I'm like, I want to talk to that Bruce. Can that Bruce be here for whoever just said that with that tone? I want more of that. And I think it was kind of interesting for him because we went at it, and if I do what I do well, which is insert myself into the conversation. Like, a lot of people used to complain about that. Why do you talk during that? Why do you cut them off? I'm like, because it's my show and it's about me in a way. Mm-hmm. So I kept pushing in, and he's talking about, stage fright or audience. And it's like when I perform that, it's not good enough, or like, I don't know if I'm looking for love, but I don't feel like, content. And at some point he's like, of course you don't. And like, I knew that, he was into my story. So we had this thing going. It was pretty great.
I just, in these last couple of questions, I do want to touch on addiction. What have you learned from whatever it is, 20, 25 years of recovery?
I do know that if you do work a program, that the obsession to drink or use drugs or act out, however you act out, will be lifted. You will not have it. It's a promise in the program.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the isms are not going to plague you for however long. There is, the term dry drunk, is a real thing.
I don't know if I know that term.
Well, dry drunk is an alcoholic who doesn't drink, but still acts like an asshole.
Oh, got it. Okay.
That is really the challenge of being sober, is like, if you want to be sober, you want to act sober, not just act like a dry drunk asshole.
Yeah.
So it's an ongoing sense of management. But I think that the message ultimately is, if you can't drink safely or use drugs or whatever it is that is your compulsion, and if it gets to a point where it makes your life unmanageable, you have a problem and you cannot do it like a normal person. And once you accept that in your bones, then you have a good starting point, at least to build a life that won't be destroyed by those things.
Is there something that you want to say or talk about on stage that you haven't figured out how to say yet?
I think there is some part of me, like not like I did in the special. There's a point where I go, I'm just going to be entertaining now, because I do know how to do that. And I think, like, maybe I should do more of that, because I do feel like I have a social responsibility because of my heroes to address, politics, cultural problems, tensions, and also my own personal darkness, whether it be Pryor or Hicks or whoever. But I think it would, maybe I could lean into just being funny.
Just be funny, right?
Just come on, dude. It's tough times for everybody. Just
make us laugh.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? I can do it.
Yeah.
I just make it really hard.
Do you ever regret not having kids?
No, never a day. I have nothing against kids, but I'm a panicky, anxious, worrying, projecting, codependent mess. I can barely handle cats, dude.
What have you learned from your cats?
What have I learned?
Yeah.
It's a lot, dude. Like I know kids are a lot, but like the way I deal with cats, it's like I got one now that's just beating the shit out of the other one, and it's relentless. The youngest one, the middle guy's kind of a dummy, so he's just like, oh, whoever's on top, I'll be with him. But it's like it's making my older cat, terrified and afraid, and it's like you cannot stop cats from being cats, and they're like half wild animal. This domesticated thing, it's just it's a con they're running. I don't know if they're pets or they're pet. I don't know what's happening.
Last question, truly. What will the first line of your obituary say?
Finally.
How do you want to be described? This is what I'm trying to get. Like, what do you want to be, like, podcaster, comedian?
You just hope that someone will feel about my work the way I feel about it, especially the comedy, because like I can't do any better than what I'm doing now. And I think it's different, and I think it's uniquely mine, and I think it's pretty powerful stuff. I just hope that the contribution meant something,
Yeah. That's it. Thank you. This was great.
Okay, good.
I can't believe how generous you were with your time, so I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can talk.